The night my sons sat with empty plates, I felt something shift inside me. My mother's calm voice said, "Your sister's children eat first. Selena's boys can wait for crumbs." My son's face looked like he had learned his place. I walked out without shouting. I walked out with a plan. For years I had paid for their comfort, bills, repairs, the family safety net they used like air. They never thanked me. They ranked my children like leftovers. So I stopped. I cut the automatic payments, closed the access, and watched the house they built on my silence begin to crack. This is the story of how I reclaimed what they stole, my son's worth, my dignity, and the family I refuse to feed anymore. If you've ever been taken for granted, listen. This is how I quietly took back power. Not with yelling, but with a ledger, a phone call, and a boundary that changed everything. When I walked into my parents' house that evening, the smell of pasta and candles was the same as always. I froze at the doorway. My mother's voice floated from the dining room with a tone I knew too well. Calm. Sure, a little proud. "My sister's kids eat first," she said. "Selena's boys can wait for the crumbs." I felt the world tilt. In the dining room, my niece Lily and her brother Caleb were getting second servings. They laughed. They sat at the table near my parents. My boys, Jalen and Theo, hovered by the side. Their plates were empty. They pretended not to be hungry. I did not say anything. I did not shout. I watched my child's shoulders tighten. I watched him try to be small. The first thing I learned was that children understand things adults try to hide. Jalen looked at me with a face that did not ask for answers. He already knew. That look cracked something inside me. I had been paying for this family for years. Small transfers here and there, emergency loans, gifts that never ended. I thought I was helping. I thought being generous would fix what felt wrong. But generosity turned into expectation. My bank account became the thing they counted on. My silence became the scaffold that held their choices. Later, when I sat in my car with my boys, my chest felt tight and empty at once. They were quiet. They trusted me to fix things. I had tried to fix things for years. The problem was that fixing had not changed how they saw my children. It only made them sure I would always fix things. That is when I made a small choice. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would plan. At home, my husband Darius listened. He did not need me to repeat the scene. One look, and he knew. He asked only one question. "What do you want to do?" That question felt like permission to think carefully. So, we did something practical. I opened the banking app. I scrolled through months of transfers labeled family help, and just until we're caught up. I had never added them up. I wrote a list. Mortgage, car, utilities, emergencies. The numbers followed like evidence. It was smaller than I had feared, but still too large to be casual. 8 years of steady help had become a plan they built their lives around. And because they had built that plan, they had built their comfort on my willingness to be invisible. The next morning I made calls. I canceled automatic transfers. I fixed the cosign settings on loans. I sent an email to my accountant asking for a full list of the support I had given over the years. I did not dramatize. I did not call a family meeting. I used the quiet of administrative work to build a new boundary. For me, this was the first real act of power I had taken in a long time. Not showy, not loud, just a ledger and a deadline. Money has a strange way of making things real. When it stopped, their plan began to wobble. When it wobbled, they finally had to feel what my sons felt. Small, ignored, unaccounted for. That day I learned a second thing. Boundaries are not mean when they protect children. They can look like numbers in an app and phone calls at dawn. They can be dull and icy and necessary. I had cried quietly before making the changes, not because I was angry, but because the truth hurt. I had helped build the thing that hurt my children. I would not help it anymore. It was not revenge as violence. It was revenge as correction, the removal of support that had been used as a cushion for neglect. I felt lighter, and my boys began to breathe easier that week. They did not know why. They only noticed I was calmer. I knew the work was only beginning. After that night, I became methodical. I opened old emails, bank statements, and messages. I wrote down every transfer I had made in the last 8 years. Mortgage help, car payments, an old line of credit I had quietly paid down, small gifts that showed up month after month. The list was precise and ugly. I called the mortgage company first. As a co-borrower years ago, I had left permissions open. The agent walked me through the steps. We could remove my name if my parents refinanced, or if they could qualify a loan. I wrote down what that involved. I did not threaten. I asked for clarity. I wanted to be sure I understood the impact on everyone. Next, I called auto lenders and utility companies. I changed passwords. I canceled recurring transfers. I froze a savings cushion I had set aside for emergencies. That cushion had cost me sleep and small pleasures. I knew where their comfort came from. It was not cruel to stop it. It was wise. When my sister Vanessa called, she sounded off balance. "Selena, my car payment got denied," she said. There was a thinness in her voice, the sound of someone who had assumed a safety net would always be there. I repeated exactly what she had said at our parents' house. She fell silent. "You said that," she whispered. Her loyalty to my parents had been loud for years. Now she sounded like someone learning new facts about the world. My parents called later. My mother's voice trembled. "We don't know how this happened," she said. Their confusion felt practiced, the kind of tone people use when a plan shows cracks. "We'll figure it out," I said simply. My tone was calm and final. In the evenings, my sons grew quieter at dinner for a week. They watched me as if waiting for permission to be happy. I tried to make the table small and warm. I let Jalen take the seat near the window he had avoided before. Theo told jokes at breakfast and did not look for adults' approval for seconds. That small change in them was worth everything I did that week. The fallout outside my house was messy, but not dramatic. Darius's phone buzzed with my father's calls. Vanessa texted. My mother left a message sounding like panic. They scrambled, made new plans, cut back on little luxuries. I watched them adjust. It was sad to see anyone struggle, but it was also necessary. If my sons grew up thinking second place was normal, I would not forgive myself. When I logged into my accounts 2 weeks later, the numbers were steady. The automatic transfers were gone. There were no more "we'll pay you back" messages. No more crisis notes timed for the day my paycheck arrived. The house they had grown used to was smaller now. I did not dance on their loss. I checked my boys' faces. They were different. Jalen sat straighter at school. When he painted at the kitchen table, he left empty spaces on his paper and filled them with bright color, as if he were making room for himself. Theo stopped apologizing for taking a second slice. Their small acts told me my boundary was working. The lesson I learned was practical. Changing unbalanced systems rarely needs dramatic acts. It needs steady, legal moves. Quiet changes create loud consequences. I did not want to punish my family. I wanted to protect my children and teach them they are not scraps. I also learned something else. Some people will respond with bargaining. Vanessa called and tried to trade favors. My parents cried about the house. That is normal. The difference this time was I did not feel responsible for repairing the emotional damage they had caused. I took a deep breath and kept my list nearby. Every time I wanted to be soft again, I thought of Jalen's face in the dining room doorway. 48 hours after I stopped the transfers, the calls started. Not angry at first. Practical. Businesslike. "There seems to be an issue with the mortgage," my father said. He spoke like a man who expected help. I told him calmly. I canceled it. The pause on the phone was heavy. Vanessa called next. She sounded sharp. "How could you?" she asked. But her voice broke when I said, "You told me my boys should wait for crumbs." She had laughed then. Now she sounded like she was bargaining for comfort. It was not an easy sound. People panic when a plan they relied on collapses. My mother called FaceTime. Her eyes were small on the screen. The word "punish" came out of her mouth like a petition. "We are being punished." I repeated the phrase she had used at the table. "You are the ones teaching that lesson." There was a moment of silence where I could hear the reality settling. The calls began to reach neighbors and cousins. Someone asked me what I expected to gain. I told them I wanted my children to have dignity. It was a simple sentence, but it changed the tone. I did not want drama in public. I did not want to explain my family to strangers. I told only what I needed to. The automatic supports were gone. A week later, my parents moved to a smaller apartment. They had options. They had adult skills, but they had grown used to comfort they did not have to earn. Vanessa took extra shifts. She called rarely. The family calendar lost its luxury. At home, the change was quiet and real. Jalen walked to the table without checking for permission. He drew with new confidence. Theo sang at breakfast. The boys did not know the specifics of the ledger I had created. They only knew they were no longer taught to wait for crumbs. The thing I did not expect was the sympathy I felt for my parents. They were older now, and the loss of comfort hit them. I still loved them. Setting boundaries did not mean hating them. It meant choosing my children. I learned that real boundaries are messy. They do not make you feel proud every moment. They make you feel heavy sometimes, because you see faces you love struggle. But I do not regret it. My sons were worth the discomfort. The real revenge, if you can call it that, was how they had to feel their own mistakes. When you stop being someone's automatic rescue, they have to become adults. When people asked how I felt, I told them. I felt awake. For the first time, I stopped giving with an empty center. I had a plan and a list and a partner. I had a reason. And my boys, that was the deciding fact. After the initial panic, life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. My parents adjusted. My sister found more work. I learned small practical things. How to file paperwork to remove myself from co-sign responsibilities, how to set stronger passwords, and how to keep an accounting spreadsheet that became my Bible. At home, the changes were slower. The boys did not talk about the dining room incident often, but I could see it in the way they ate and moved. They no longer checked adult faces for permission to be loud or to take a second helping. The small things showed the big change. I also learned that sometimes the quietest choices are the most dramatic. No one expected me to be so clinical. They expected drama, a blow-up, a public scene, a big speech. Instead, I did paperwork, I called companies, I made practical adjustments. That kind of action has a strange effect. It leaves no room for moralizing. It simply changes the facts. My parents tried to argue that this was cruel. They said I had broken family. I sat with that accusation for a long time. I thought about all the times I had been small for them. The kindnesses they had expected were not always kindness. They were demands dressed as needs. For years I had been ashamed to say no. I was ashamed to have used my money to buy their silence. But shame is a heavy thing to carry. I gave it up. The quiet one in another way. My sons gained small freedoms. Jalen started a school art club. He did not ask permission to sign up. Theo, who used to hide his best toys from cousins, left his toys on the living room floor and played proudly. Watching them be children. That was the reward. At dinner one night, my mother showed up for no reason and asked if she could sit. I looked up. She seemed smaller and older. She spoke softly. "We are sorry." I said, "I know you are sorry." I did not demand an apology. I did not want drama. But I needed change. She listened. She moved slower. It felt real. Not all wounds healed. Not all relationships mended. But boundaries do not promise to fix everything. They promise protection. They promise a different future. I learned a new phrase. I will not be available for that. It felt strange at first to say those words aloud. But they were true. My help would be different now. If I helped, I would do it on my terms, with respect and reciprocity. That is the most practical lesson I could give my boys. Generosity, without self-erasure, is possible. Seeing my children sit at our table, no checking the adults, no shrinking, became the new normal. That normal was quiet, but it was everything. Months passed. The family dynamic shifted. People adjusted. My parents learned to budget differently. Vanessa learned new ways to earn. The emotional price they paid was real. I did not gloat. But I also did not back down. What changed most was what I taught my children without big speeches. Children learn by watching. They watched me do difficult but steady work. They watched me choose them over comfort. That lesson soaked into them more than any lecture ever could. Jalan now corrected teachers when they assumed he was last for group turns. He raised his hand with confidence. Theo asked for second helpings and did not apologize. One afternoon, Jalan came to me with a drawing. In it, he had drawn our family at a table. Everyone was smiling. In the picture, Jalan was in the middle. He had drawn himself bigger. I felt something well up that was not sadness. It was relief. The drawing was proof that our quiet choices had changed the shape of his world. I also learned to protect myself financially. I saved intentionally. I set boundaries around loans, and I stopped believing that love equals paying. Love equals respect and presence. Money is only one tool to help. It is not the same as respect. Friends asked how I felt about revenge. I told them this. I did not want to hurt people. I wanted to stop a pattern that hurt my children. Revenge as a motive is petty. My motive was protection. My plan looked like revenge to them because it forced consequences. But consequences are necessary when patterns become cruel. I began to talk about boundaries with other women. Friends who had been drained by family asked for advice. I told them to take one small step. List the transfers, cancel one automatic payment, and see what happens. Start with a ledger. It will show you where your energy goes. At one point, my mother asked to come over for coffee. She sat at my kitchen table and cried quietly. Apology is messy. I held space without making it into a test. Some things improved. Others stayed the same. That is how families are. The biggest satisfaction was quiet. The sound of my sons laughing without looking for permission. That sound became the measure of success. People outside the family called it ruthless. Social media would have called it dramatic. In our neighborhood, a few cousins whispered. Inside my house, the quiet was different, warmer. I remember one call from my father where he sounded smaller. We thought you would always help, he said. I told him, we thought you would always see our boys. He could not find an answer. That was the point. When someone uses your kindness as a script, their script collapses if you stop playing. Vanessa came by months later. She brought a small cake. We ate quietly. She said, I didn't know how to do it. I said, none of us knew some of these things until we had to. She looked at the boys and smiled in a way that was finally soft. That mattered. Some relationships never recovered. Some conversations ended. Families are the complicated places they are because love and harm can live together. My choice was to reduce harm and accept whatever came. If you ask me if I feel satisfied, I will say this. Satisfaction is not the right word. I feel certain. I feel calm in a way that comes from not being used as someone's permanent fix. I feel proud that I chose my children's dignity. That felt like choosing life over a habit of giving away pieces of myself. A friend asked if I feared regret. I told her that fear is normal, but I had done the math, found the pattern, and trusted my instincts. That trust mattered. One evening, months after the transfer stopped, I sat at the table and watched the boys move into the seats they had avoided. Jalan sat in the center chair and declared it his seat. Theo asked for another bowl of soup without checking to see if he was allowed. Their laughter filled the kitchen. The table looked different, full not because of wealth, but because of space for everyone. I will not pretend it was easy. There were nights I questioned myself. There were tangles of guilt and love. But when I think of that night in my parents' dining room, I no longer feel powerless. I feel like the mother who acted for her children's worth. If this story touches you, please do 3 small things. Like this video, subscribe for more real family stories, and share one moment when you set a boundary in the comments. Your story could be the spark someone else needs. This was not revenge in the violent sense. It was a reclamation. I stopped feeding a system that taught my children to accept less. I took back the table. I took back my son's place in our family. And I will not apologize for it.